the phrase school refusal is actually a thing, which started to emerge in the last couple of years. And so we actually see that and talk about that in sort of in therapy circles, like, okay, this is like a symptom is school refusal, right? So this type of behavior is certainly normalized. It's a little, I guess I want to say, let me change the way I'm saying that, like, to this mother, like, you're not alone, right? Your child is not the only person who is experiencing this type of thing. And I hope that.
Hey MOMnation, welcome to Mental Wealth with Laura Wood and Katie Holly Lambert, where we talk through generational trauma so we can leave a new legacy for our children. Counselor Laura is with Benevieri Counseling out of Chandler, Arizona, and you can find her on Facebook, on the web, or by the link in the show notes. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, it's Thursday, the last Thursday of the month, and you know what that means, Laura. That means it's time for another episode of Mental Wealth. Woo!
It sure is. And when you said it's Thursday, I was like, it is?
You know what?
What is wrong with me?
Oddly enough, I've had the same sort of week, and I've thought that it was the day before all week long.
Yeah. I was like, I thought it was Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but here we are.
Here we are. And hi.
Hi.
Welcome back. All right, everybody,
you.
for those of you who know, I know this is one of your favorite shows that we have here on MOMnation because it is oh so informative. And Laura, I just love the way, this is feedback that I've received about you actually, or about this show, is you take these like pretty complex things and break them down into easy to understand for the normal human being. So thank you for doing that.
Oh.
Thank you on behalf of all of MOMnation.
That's really nice. I am really glad that you feel that way. I feel like I kind of just say the same thing over and over. Like, I say this, my answer is so much the same for like every single question that I feel like people are probably like, you just said that for the last thing though. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's like still the answer for this thing too.
But it's still a thing, really, I promise.
Yeah, it's the same answer.
Awesome. Well, we have a post again, like we often like to do. Sometimes we'll have a topic that we want to talk through. And this show really, guys, is for us to kind of help support you as mamas in getting over your past traumas, in figuring out how to get through that so that you don't pass it along to your kiddos. And that's really where the name comes from. You know, you think of wealth as something that's passed down generationally. Well, so is your mental health. I don't know. How would you say that?
Your mental health or your mental wealth, right? Generational patterns, like, even if it's not generational trauma specifically, it's generational patterns of communication, of, you know, do we have a culture of secrecy in our family? Do we have a pattern of behavior that includes like, poor communication or whatever, right? So we pass those things down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So something that we have talked about before is, you know, even if, and correct me if I get this wrong, but even if I didn't experience the same thing that, say, one of my caregivers did, I still could feel that effect because of the triggers and the patterns and whatnot that my caregiver sort of taught me. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to react in similar ways. And then we're also going to sort of mimic and what we call an enactment or reenactment. So we reenact a lot of our own patterns because that's our brain trying to like sort things out. A lot of the time, our solutions that we think are happening in the present, like we're trying to solve problems in the present, but the reality is our brain is actually trying to rewrite the past, right? So, for example, often as a therapist, I can use myself like as an example, and many therapists that I know who get into the work because of their own histories, right? So effectively, we're reenacting our own history by trying to solve it for someone else, right? Or trying to like support someone else or help someone else. So a lot of times, that's why people who have experienced adversity will often become advocates, right? So it's not a bad thing that we sort of take this stuff and use it as fuel to fuel our future patterns. However, it can be if it's not coming from a healthy place, or if it's not done in an intentional and adaptive way, and it's really underneath our awareness in an unhealthy way, such as repeating a pattern of abuse, right? So a lot of the time, if we were abused as children, we turn into abusers because our system is sort of looking for a resolution and seeking out that power, or seeking to correct or right a wrong in some way, right? So it kind of runs the gambit of good, bad, and everything kind of in between, right? Like the world is not black and white. It's a really gray place. So we want to kind of think about, what are we doing, and how are we demonstrating the things that we want to change to our children? And what's most interesting is that when you're in the middle of it, you do not know that it's happening. So
yeah.
So it often takes an outsider, right? You can't see your own face without a mirror. You need feedback, and you need to kind of be able to look at that from a different angle in order to actually see it. So that's why third parties, friends, groups like this, and then also obviously therapists and partners and everything else are they're a mechanism to kind of get that other perspective, so that you can really examine what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if you like it, you love it, and keep going. And if you think, maybe I want to make a difference or change this because it doesn't seem to work for me, so I want to make a difference now, then, make a change.
Awareness is key.
Yeah. And it's hard to be aware when you're in it. I mean, I'll tell you, with my own kids, like, I'm not their therapist, right? So like, I'm like, what do I do? And then, people say to me, well, you're a therapist, you know what to do. And I'm like, that's not helpful, because I'm a mom right now. I'm not their therapist, right? Like, so it can be really hard to see those patterns when you're in the middle of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had wondered that too. I wondered if you've had those conversations. Do you, therapy your own kids? I can imagine that just doesn't work. You just can't do that.
No, it doesn't work. It's not as easy to be objective. And, I'll tell you, my boyfriend called me out recently. I guess, I don't remember how long ago it was. And I apologize for the shaky video if anybody's getting motion sick.
Good.
But, anyhow, so he had called me out recently, and I was concerned about something that was going on. And I think it was maybe the way that I was creating rules or enforcing them, or maybe I was being too lenient or whatever, right? Like I was trying to work through something with one of my kids, and it wasn't working very well. And I was sort of talking to him, and I'm like, I know that he feels this way. Like I was so avoidant during this time, and I wasn't there for him. And like, so that's why this is happening now. And it's like, I was in my head about stuff that was going on in 2013 and seeing the situation from that perspective, whereas the kid was just going through what's happening right now and looking for support and assistance and wanting to like figure out how to move forward, right? And so here I am looking at it through my perspective as like the mom who like made it hard for, like caused all this problems in the first place that we could, right? Like the mom that messed up my kid, and now he's not confident, or now he has this challenge, or now he doesn't know how to do this, and that's all my fault, and he must feel this way, and blah, blah.
Right.
And it's like, I'm having this conversation with myself. Matter of fact, like the kid's not even involved. This is just me spiraling, and it's totally ineffective. And so, so my boyfriend said to me, he was like, what are you even talking about? Like, none of that is happening. You're projecting your own feelings of guilt and failure onto what's happening now, which in turn is actually creating sort of this essence of failure. Like I'm saying like, oh, the child is not successful because of me. That means I'm saying the child can't be successful. And that's not true. That's objectively wrong. That's my own stuff saying, well, you've messed up your kid. Right. And so like, I was in that for a long time, and I didn't know I was in that. I thought I was just like empathizing and like really understanding my kid and whatever, but it turns out I was just like overly like spiraling in my own, shame patterns, which is not helpful at all. And so once I kind of realized like, oh, his behavior right now is not about my failures as a mother. His behavior right now is about something that he's struggling with, and he probably just needs to learn how to do it. And I could actually just teach him and he would be fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then I can so relate with that. And I'm not even a therapist. And and you are, you know what I mean? And
Totally.
It just goes to show that if you don't know
Mhm.
that you're in it, even with all the knowledge and experience that you have, we are all human, right?
Yeah, because I have my own history. I'm a human with a nervous system, and I feel things, and I have regret, and I have, things that I worry about because I'm a mother and I want my kids to
Mm-hmm.
be successful and I want them to thrive. And so it can be really scary when they're not. It can be really scary when they're struggling. It can be really scary when they are just seeming to not be able to get unstuck, right? And that kind of reminds me of our post. I mean,
Yeah, our
I
topic.
didn't intentionally like transition that so well, but I really, if I
But
do
it
say
was
so
perfect.
myself, I nailed it.
Nailed
So
it.
if you want to introduce the post today, we can kind of keep talking about that.
Absolutely, I would love to. So for those of you who are familiar with the show, or even if you're not, we will often pick an anonymous post in the MOMnation Arizona group that has a topic that we want to share. And today, that's what we did. Sometimes we have just standalone topics that is something that's kind of burning for both of us or one of us that we want to talk about. But today it is a post by an anonymous member. This one is a pretty fresh one, Laura. This came out 2 days ago. I'm going to read it for those of you who are on the podcast version. Long post, please help. My daughter is already refusing to go to school before it even starts. She refused to go in the past, and when she was little, I could pick her up, put her in the car, and then her teacher would come and get her. Now that she's older, 14, that's not an option. Last year, she missed almost 2 weeks of school total just from not wanting to go, not including any time she was sick or had appointments. She had major consequences that did not faze her enough to not do it again. She's in therapy. We have called a crisis team to our house before, but they couldn't do much because she wasn't threatening to hurt herself or others. This is not about safety concerns or bullying, as she is the bully in most situations. It's about control. She'll be a freshman at a new school, and she wants to go to a school that we cannot take her to. We've even called transportation to see if they can bus her, and they said they can only bus her if she has a disability, and now she wants us to help her fake a disability. So she's angry and threatening to not go. There really isn't anything we can do, is there? We looked into boarding school, and they are so expensive. She is mean and angry and says hurtful things to everyone around her. My question is, what the heck can I do when she refuses to go to school for no good reason? And we're
That's
back.
a lot. That's a lot. There's so much there. The one of the biggest things that stands out to me here is I have seen so many teens over the past couple of years who are like the phrase school refusal is actually a thing, which started to emerge in the last couple of years. And so we actually see that and talk about that in sort of in therapy circles, like, okay, this is like a symptom is school refusal, right? So this type of behavior is certainly normalized. It's a little, I guess I want to say, let me change the way I'm saying that, like to this mother, like you're not alone, right? Your child is not the only person who is experiencing this type of thing. And I hope that that's at least a little bit helpful to know, because this has really, really been a big thing this last couple of years. I do have some questions. So like, I want to kind of air the things like I don't know the answers to, right? Like, I don't know why she doesn't want to go to school. So I can kind of speculate in terms of general reasons that I've heard, but like, and different ways to kind of work through those. I also don't know what she's in therapy for. right? And so like, and why she didn't want to go in the past. So like some of those things are really important in understanding how to help. And then I would also wonder what her therapist thinks,
Mhm.
right? And if it's um a conversation that they can have together and work through, some different strategies and, different goals. But my first thing would be I want to know why, like what's happening for her. I know mom said for no good reason, but um, for the kid, it's a good reason. So, right. Like, so,
Mhm.
mo- so there's, and we can go through, I kind of want to look at this from two perspectives, right? I want to look at this from mom's perspective, and then I want to look at this from child's perspective. Because it sounds like they're obviously going to be different, right?
Right.
So mom's perspective is, hey, you're not sick. There's no reason for you not to go to school. What the heck? Right? Like you
You're
have
not
to go to
being
school.
bullied.
Right. Like you have to go to school. That's a thing, right? That's the law. That's that you have to have an education. You're a child. Like those are all valid things, right? Like, so as a parent, we're like, what the heck is going on? Right? Like you need to just go to school. Like this is weird. And just an issue that doesn't need to be an issue. Like it's so easy to just get up and go. Right. At least that's like I can imagine like feeling that way.
Mhm.
I have felt that way. My kids I've had experienced trouble with this before personally. Um, so from mom's perspective, it's like, what the heck is going on? But from child's perspective, right? At least from what I know, she's angry, she's mean. Um, those two things tell me something is wrong, right? So that tells me that the child is in a defensive or protective stance. So um I don't know the original I believe it was Stephen Porges, but we're wired for, so there's, when we're in danger or in fear, in hypervigilance, in fight or flight, we're wired for protection. But in a healthy, sort of safe environment, we're wired for connection, right? So when we're protecting, then we're defending, we're not connecting, we're pushing people away, we're right. So those all tell me that I'm protecting against something, right? That tells
Mhm.
me that a defense posture, a defensive behavior, which is any kind of outburst or whatever, um, that tells me that the child is protecting herself from something. And I don't know what.
Mhm.
And so we want, and I'm guessing mom wants, for the child to not be mean and hurtful, right? Because kids can say some real mean things
Right.
um, that really are painful to hear, and are, it's one of the biggest challenges of being a mom is when your kid takes a stance like that and says really hurtful things. Like I can relate. I've had that time before too, and it's really just breaks your heart, right? So I'm guessing mom really wants that connection. But the key to know is that we as humans in a healthy, safe environment are wired for connection. A child desperately wants to be connected to their caregivers. And that means they want that desperately. But if they're afraid of rejection, or if they're in a defensive posture for some other reason, then they're going to push away that protection because they're afraid of getting too close, right? So it's approach. If I approach, am I going to get, am I going to get hurt?
Mhm.
So that's when kids are really mean, that's kind of what we know what's happening. We know that they're defending, they're pushing us away because they're afraid of getting hurt. And that might not make logical sense to us because it's frankly, it's not a logical experience. It's a limbic experience, which occurs before the cortex is even informed, right? So we're not even thinking, that information comes in, and it's our response happens before we even know what we're responding to, right? So it's not a logical experience. So it doesn't, so when mom says no good reason, yeah, that could be true. There may not be a logical, factual reason.
Mhm.
However, the child's responding to something. They're sensing some kind of threat that they need, that they're protecting against. I that's the key to helping them work on re-engagement in their life.
Mhm.
I see your thinking face.
No, I am. I'm like taking it all in. It makes so much sense. What are some, and I hope this isn't drastically changing the subject. It's just a question that I had. What are some reasons why we don't know the reason why the school refusal is happening, but what are some common reasons why that you have dealt with in the past of, with a kid about that age, let's say?
Gosh, I mean, school refusal, so it's a symptom of a bigger issue. So like social anxiety sometimes. Like if a kid is just like, I can't just be around all these people. Like I just feel worn out, right? Like that's actually a really big thing. I hear this from kids all the time, like my social battery is running out. So just sort of that depression. I don't have the motivation to get out of bed. I don't have the motivation to take a shower. I don't have the motivation to take care of myself. So feelings of depression, feelings of anxiety, feelings of like pressure and fear of failure also. So like, for example, being overwhelmed by the amount of work. So that's a really common one. Like it's overwhelming. They say it's like, it's too much. Like the assignments, once I miss one thing, like a lot of times it's like a trickle. It's so I miss one day, now I'm behind.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day I'm doing the next day's work, but I still have yesterday's work and I don't finish it. So it just keeps adding to the pile and adding to the pile and never fully coming back down. And after you get to a point where the pile just looks too big, it's like, nah, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
So then we freeze. We hear this fight, flight, freeze, whatever. That's a freeze. We're like, nope. I literally am staring at this list of assignments and I cannot even think about what to do first.
Right.
It's so overwhelming. It's paralyzing. I see that a lot. So like when mom mentions control, right? From our perspective as adults, we often look at intent, or we assume intent based on our kids' behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
So control as an intentional, malicious sort of power grab, right? That's kind of how we as adults think about it, right? Like pride, ego. Whereas think about control from a safety perspective, from a nervous system perspective. Control is the opposite of helplessness. Control is the opposite of like floundering, of frozen, not being able to do anything, right? So if they are seeking control, why? Right? It's not about malice. Like kids and teens, they don't like to be they don't like to disappoint their parents. They hate it. That's just a biological fact. With very few exceptions, kids do not like disappointing their parents. They don't like to feel like they're letting anyone down. They don't like to feel like a burden because everybody's frustrated and upset and they can't get their shit together. Shit.
It's okay.
They don't.
We're all adults here.
Thanks. I've been working on it. They don't like the feelings that come with parents asking them and nagging them to do something every single time they interact. They just don't like that. And so they're not doing this to hurt you as the parent, right? Like the malicious ego, it's not about that kind of control. It's about a sense of control, which is the opposite of helplessness. And when a kid feels overwhelmed and stuck and powerless, they're feeling helpless, right? Like they need to sort of do something. And so if control is at play here, that's how it's at play. But again, I guess I can't know. So
right.
I don't want to make an assumption about that.
I feel like that is such a complex thing for such a young kid to, when you were talking about the malice and the, I'm going to do this to, you know, control my parents or whatever. I feel like that's a really complex thing.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, you know, I catch myself even sometimes because I'm so much older than my son, right? Oftentimes I am uh, misinterpreting his intent because I have an adult mind. I've been around a lot longer.
Right.
I've seen a lot more things. And I don't always like I said, I catch myself, but I don't always think, okay, he's only 9. I mean, realistically, how much experience does he really have on this earth that he could figure something like that out? You know, I'm not saying my kid's not brilliant. I totally think he is. But really, like to figure something out that complex, I feel like we
Mhm.
have to kind of take a step back as parents and say, oh, okay, are we misinterpreting the intent here, like you mentioned?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, in a situation that is, as mom said, kind of out of control, right? When the wheels have fallen off, it's time to to zoom all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not personal. We need to get objective, and we need to get like specific, right? So it's like, what I mean by that is, you know, I can be supportive of my child who's going through something. So I can specifically say, like, I understand that this is really difficult for you. I understand that you're really angry. You know, I hear that and I'm here for you to work through that. And part of us working through that is that we are going to figure out the most effective and helpful ways to support you in getting to school, getting through the day, and making it work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're going to be objective and we're going to be specific. We can't lump all of it together because these are the lumping of everything is probably where the kid is in the first place, right? So the lumping of the anger and the not going to school and the behaviors and the frustration is all sort of connecting now with the kid's identity in terms of like their role in the house. So now the kid is going to basically be the sort of problem to solve, right? And so we need to zoom out and start separating the kid from the problem. And that's usually what happens when the wheels fall off. It's usually something like that.
Yeah.
Like once it goes that far and we're so far, we're in so deep that like we literally don't know what the heck to do because we're just like lost, which I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in those moments, like I got a full reset, like start over, zoom all the way out, look at it extremely objectively. What is possibly happening for this child that I could see? So obviously, if it wasn't my child, right? If
Mm-hmm.
I could just take myself out of this and not take it personally, it's not about me. And very importantly, I know mom didn't mention anything about this in the post, so this would be a sort of general statement. As a mom, my children's behavior can um, have an effect on the way that I see myself or that I believe other people see me.
Ah.
So, kind of like the generational patterns, the generational history, right? Like, as a mom, I want mom to ask yourself, and this may or may not apply to you, right? Like, I don't know who this is. Like, I don't know
Right.
enough, but
Yeah, we
I
don't
know
know.
that I felt this way before. Um, what does that say about me? That my kid's not going to school, what does that say about me?
Mm-hmm.
And then get congruent with that first, because your kid not going to school is not that's not yours, that's hers, right? So that's not your emotional regulation can't be dependent on the kid going to school, because bottom line, we can't force, she mentioned I can't pick her up, throw her over my shoulder, take her to school, right? Like, this is now we're dealing with an adolescent who is a separate human being, who has choices, who has some, but not a lot of autonomy, right? So we need to get right with that as moms first. Whatever this says about me, I need to kind of take that out and say like, well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't say that about me. Whatever I'm telling, story I'm telling myself about this,
Right.
probably not true.
There is a lot here. You said it in the beginning,
So
and
much.
yeah, and as I'm listening to you and kind of still thinking about the post, there's just a lot of pieces in there to pull out, and a lot of questions too. And I hope this is really helpful for this mom and you know, and all the other moms out there that might be dealing with it too. Does she have options that maybe she's unaware of, or that you know that other parents have taken? I mean, I know there's a legal sort of aspect to it here, but are there really any options in that respect?
So I don't know. I don't know very much about the law and who that actually impacts because in I have no, I can't even, I don't even want to assume, but so I don't know. I don't know anything about like the legal impacts. I do know that like truancy is on the books, right? But who does that punish? I don't have any idea if that punishes the adult or punishes the child.
Like they're not
Um,
dragging the parent to jail kind of thing?
Right. Like it's also, and I know over the past few years with COVID and hybrid schools, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with education these days, and a lot of different choices, right? As you know, Katie, like you've transitioned to homeschool, right?
Right.
When I know that when you're using the ESA program and you're homeschooling your kid, you don't have to sign a homeschool affidavit. So is there even a way for them to know that your child's not attending school? I don't know, right?
Right.
So there's just a lot there that I think is complex in terms of bureaucracy and process. But I also think that forcing like the child to go either through like legal or like boarding school, like that's not going to help her emotional health. That will get her to school, right? So we want to be real clear about our goals here. So if we prioritize her emotional and physical safety first, then we approach it from the perspective of it's not optional, right? So we can say to our kids, like, look, objectively, like this isn't an option. We are going to go to school, right? And I understand that that's going to be really hard for you. I understand that you're really mad about it. And that's okay. It's okay to be mad and it's okay for it to be hard. I also know that it's not too hard. And I know that I'm going to show up for you and we're going to get through it together.
No,
And so go ahead.
sorry, something that you said sort of sparked another question for me. So if we're forcing and if we're, you know, doing the things that they obviously would probably really upset them, like boarding school and that kind of thing, because if they don't want to go to school here, they probably really don't want to go away. When we have that anxiety, when we're being forced to do something we really don't want to do because there's some other things going on, how does that affect our ability to learn?
Well, it completely hinders our ability to learn. Because of that wiring for connection or protection, right? So when we're in protection mode, defensive mode, where we're acting out, we're, you know, doing all these things. When we're doing those things, we're protecting against something. And that protection is the top priority. So our mind, our brain, it specifically is prioritizing the mechanisms and functions in our brain that go towards protection and is deprioritizing the mechanisms and functions in our brain that go towards learning and day-to-day maintenance, like just, you know, regular cognitive abilities. Because those aren't helpful in a danger situation, right? Like we need to move fast. We can't think, we have to just do. So we're really reactive. We're really, it's hard for us to gain control of ourselves, right? Like we do things we regret, we say things we regret because we're moving faster than our brain is thinking. Our thinking brain is not prioritized in those moments. So it dramatically impacts our ability to learn. Like you won't learn anything. You'll forget everything immediately. Like And sending a kid away is a last plan, Z10 resort, because
Z10.
like, I don't care what your pagination is on this chart, it's a Z10. It's the highest, lowest, worst plan. Anyway, but it's the last resort, and really should only be in order to keep them safe or keep others safe.
Right.
And the reason why I say that is because when we send a kid away and we throw up our hands and say, I don't know what to do anymore, I give up, the kid is getting emotionally, and this is not necessarily, this is the way the kid perceives that, is abandonment, is I'm bad, I'm too much, like there's something so wrong with me that even my own parents can't and won't and don't want to be around me. So that's an abandonment based on their characteristics and their behaviors. And that will do far more damage than figuring out the best school for them.
I have to say I agree, and I'm no expert and have never had experience with this, but I imagine that it also destroys that connection. So
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Right, or like maybe destroy is a bit too severe of a word, but I think it would certainly tax that connection.
Mm-hmm. I would call it a rupture for sure, right? So that attachment connection that a child is wired for, we've talked about this a little bit before, the childhood attachment and adult attachment. Childhood attachment is dependent on a single caregiver, that parent-child connection. And so during childhood, a breach or perceived breach in that attachment, which can come in the form of like harshly worded answer to a simple question, right? Like your kids go off and pout when they ask for milk and you're like, not right now, we're about to have dinner. And they're like, why are you yelling at me? Right?
Yeah.
But it's like, and
Been
you're
there.
like,
I'm not. Sit down.
and so they perceive that as a potential attachment breach. That's a rejection. That hurts their heart, right?
Yeah.
Imagine saying, you're too difficult, I'm gonna send you somewhere else because I just don't even want to do this anymore. That is the biggest breach of attachment that a child can experience.
And I can see why you're saying it's last resort, because if there is a situation where there is self-harm or harming another or something like that. Yeah.
Yes. If their safety is at risk, if other people's safety is at risk, then we have to do that. And that's for them, right? That's I have to make these hard decisions to keep you safe. And so if that's not happening, I would back up and try to come up with a different plan. And I would start by connecting. I would start with attunement, not why are you not doing what I say, or why won't you go to school, or whatever, but an attunement like, I have no agenda. I'm just going to go interact with you because I like you, because I think you're important, and because I'm going to validate the fact that you are a super worthwhile person. And, I'm glad that you exist and you deserve to have someone on your team.
And now what if there's been some interaction that hasn't quite gone that way? And we've all had that as parents, right? Where we've reacted in a way to our kid that was probably just an emotional reaction in the moment. We really didn't mean it, Yeah. And so I feel like I've been here before. It's okay to go to your kid and be like, hey, yo, like, can we forget all that? Can we just talk about, I just want to, like you said, validating and sharing that you feel that they're valuable and you do want them around, you do want to help them. Hey, can you just share with me what's going on? And I don't know if this particular mom's, we are kind of generally speaking here a bit in this show. I don't know if this particular mom has done that, if she knows what the reason is, if she's sort of gone down that road. But I mean, we can reset, right? We can start again. It's okay to say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm a human person and parents mess up too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think so that reset, that's what we repair, right? We have these attachment ruptures and then we have a repair. And the repair is equally as important, if not more important, than avoiding the rupture, right? Because we all lose our shit.
Yeah.
And as given the example about the milk before dinner earlier, sometimes we're not even trying to be nasty and they're like, meh, you know what I mean? It's like, exactly. You don't know what's going to affect them, right? So when we do that, we need to come forward with our guards down. So if we come at them defensive and say, I'm sorry for yelling at you, but when you act like that, I get so frustrated that I just yell because you're breaking all these rules. That's not an apology. I'm sorry for yelling at you. Even though I was upset, it's not okay for me to yell and scream. The end. Right? So no matter how, this is what we're teaching our kids, right? No matter how upset I get, it's never okay for me to yell and scream or demean or hurt you, right? It's not okay for me to physically hurt you or damage property or emotionally hurt you, no matter how upset I am. Even if you just like threw a rock through my window, right? It's still not okay for me to be nasty and like abusive.
Right.
It's objectively true.
Right.
Now that's not saying, and you can do whatever you want from now on. That's saying,
right.
That's saying I'm owning my part in my own nervous system regulation. And you deserve for me to hold my word so that I can teach you discipline and you can learn from this. And so that's why you're still going to be, not able to, go out with your friends to the movie like you had wanted to, because you can't throw rocks through windows. So, okay, love you. Bye.
Right. Just because we're connecting with our child doesn't mean there aren't rules, doesn't mean that there isn't discipline, doesn't mean that there aren't expectations.
Exactly. Kids who are out of control need connection and attachment and love and acceptance, which is often the hardest things for our ego to give them when they are defying us.
Right.
That ego thing, that's our problem.
That makes a lot of sense. And something, again, if you're in the middle of it, like we said in the beginning, you might not know that that's necessarily going on.
Right. You don't, because you think, well, I'm rewarding. I hear this all the time. I'm rewarding bad behavior. No, you're not. Loving your child, even though their behavior is bad, or I don't even like the word bad, but I'm a therapist, so whatever, you can still use it if you're a regular human. But loving your child, no matter their behavior, is certainly not rewarding behavior that you don't want. It's just what every human baby and child deserves
and needs. And
needs and cannot live without, cannot grow and develop properly without. Right. So you're meeting their developmental needs while you're also teaching them discipline, teaching them skills. You can do this thing even though it's hard. I know that you are feeling really, really overwhelmed by this. I know that this makes you so angry. I can see that and I can hear it. And so I'm going to be here for you so that we can work through it, so that you can be successful at it. you're not alone.
And that's
They can
just,
still be
it's,
grounded.
it's so helpful for them all throughout life too.
Oh yeah, for
You're
sure.
teaching them like life skills, which is what we should be doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's empathy, right? It's empathy and it's compassion because we're all just humans. We make mistakes, right? Like if well, how many how many of us adults in therapy have had an internal belief at one time or another that they potentially are unlovable?
Mm,
Where
right.
does that come from?
Right.
Yeah,
Pretty much everything comes from way back then. I mean, that's
sure.
what I've experienced anyway.
Yeah. That's when we form our um view of the world. That's when we form our associations with interactions, with safety and danger. That's when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you can't continue to form it or correct the formation as an older person, because you can. But kids who don't get hugs and who are held to super duper high behavioral standards without a lot of like attunement and like real connection, without defense, like real connection from parents with love and validation and acceptance, regardless of the behavior. If you're not getting that, then odds are, you will struggle to trust the connections in your relationships, and your value of yourself will be somewhat performance based, right?
Mm.
You may think to yourself, I didn't do enough today. Like, how could anyone love me? Like, how can my wife or my husband even stand to like be with me when this house is such a mess? Like, I didn't even do anything today.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody ever thought that before?
Mm. I think probably a lot.
I would say maybe 100% of, I know 100% of people in this room have, right? So those beliefs are derived from conditional love.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's a topic for another show.
Write that down.
I'm writing it down right now. We're not going to forget this one.
It's 3:57.
It is. It's 3:57. So tell the people how to get in touch with you, Laura. P.S.
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to not give kudos to that last statement, by the way. I mean, obviously I'm writing it down because it was hugely impactful on me.
Okay,
how can the
good.
people get you?
Well, so my practice is located in Chandler, and you can find us at benaviri.com. That's BENAVIERI.com. Or all my socials are at Benaviri. And I am the owner and clinical supervisor of a group practice. So we have therapists who work with adults, we have therapists who work with kids, all trained and certified in working with trauma. And we have a life coach too. So if your kid or teen in particular is not feeling the need for therapy, they may be willing to do some coaching because it's a shorter thing. It's really goal focused. It's not therapy. So it's actually a really cool alternative that we're excited to offer.
Awesome. I love that.
Uh,
Well, thank you again for being here with us yet again, another month. And for those of you who want to check out any of our past shows, like I said in the beginning, Laura has this amazing way, and you saw it in this show, of breaking down really complex things and making them understandable for the normal human. So thank you so much, Laura. You can find any of our previous episodes over on our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That is our handle. Or if you prefer the podcast type, go on over to your favorite podcast platform and do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. And you can subscribe, notify, like, download, all the things. And that way you can catch Laura each month here on Mental Wealth with me too.
Yes. With you too. You're the glue, Katie. You're the glue.
What can I say? So thanks, guys. Bye, Laura.
Bye.